When the facts bend reality, this is beyond plausible.
In the dead of night, a man stood frozen before a door that shouldn't exist in his own hallway. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like old blood. From behind the wood came a soft scratching, like fingernails dragging across the inside surface. His breath hitched in his throat as a voice, impossibly close yet muffled, whispered just for him, "You have to stop looking for it." The words weren't heard with his ears, but felt in the very marrow of his bones. You have to forget it's even there. The command carried the weight of a forgotten grave, cold and absolute. Paralyzed by the unknown, he understood this wasn't a warning, but a condition. That's the only way the door will open. That's the only way to get your sister back. Cut to rapid, disorienting flashes. An empty alleyway at night. A flickering street lamp cast sickly yellow light through the mist. A weathered wooden door stood where a solid brick wall should have been. In a dark window's reflection, Sarah Carter's face appeared, pale, wide-eyed, and frozen in terror. This is the story of Sarah and Leo Carter, and the library that shouldn't exist. A place that feeds on doubt and hides in the blind spots of your mind. A place you can only find when you stop believing. Sarah Carter was a woman of practicality, navigating Boston's archival world through facts, catalog numbers, and preservation assets. Her younger brother Leo existed in a different realm entirely. A poet and dreamer, perpetually drawn to whispers of the strange. Their bond was forged from this contrast. Sarah anchored Leo to reality, while Leo showed Sarah the magic lurking in forgotten corners. Leo's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "It's not on any map, Sarah. That's the whole point." Mrs. Abernathy, the woman at the rare book stall, he continued, a note of reverence creeping in. A faint, metallic scent, like old coins and dust, seemed to hang in the air as he spoke her name. She swore by it. The final words hung between them, heavy and absolute. "She told me her grandfather found it during the blackout of '78. A private library," she said, hidden away in the dark. The air inside smelled of old paper and something faintly metallic, like ozone after a storm. He claimed it held unwritten books, volumes with blank pages that somehow held stories. Sarah sighed, but a strange smile touched her lips as she whispered, "Unwritten books. So, blank pages? Very rare." Leo's voice dropped to a ragged whisper, thick with a dread that seemed to thicken the very air around us. "No, books that haven't happened yet." The implication hung there, a cold, oily weight in the silence, smelling faintly of ozone and old ink. Or books that the world has abandoned. Stories that slipped through the cracks of memory. Narrator. Sarah humored him. It was their ritual. Leo would hunt down local legends, the submerged tunnel beneath the harbor, the spectral glows haunting the marshes, and they'd investigate. Sarah would dismantle each mystery with cold logic, and they'd end the night with pizza. But this one consumed Leo, an obsession that blotted out everything else. Visual. Leo's journal. The artist's sketches show a door that seems to shift and blur at the edges, never quite anchored to a wall or frame. In the margins, a single note reads, "It appears only to those who have lost a story of their own." A brittle newspaper clipping from 1953 details the sudden disappearance of a local author. The air in the archive carries the scent of decayed paper and something faintly metallic, like old ink turned to rust. 3 weeks ago, Leo vanished after one of his solo reconnaissance missions. His phone went straight to voicemail, and the police investigation turned up nothing. But Sarah discovered his journal, left open on his unmade bed as if he'd just stepped away. The air in his room carried the faint scent of ozone and damp earth, clinging to the pages. The journal's final entry was a single, frantic line scrawled across the page. It read, "It's real. I saw the door." The ink bled slightly where the pen had pressed too hard. The next words were even more hurtful, almost illegible. "But it won't open." The final, chilling instruction was underlined twice. "You have to not see it to enter." Sarah's methodical nature became her weapon, turning every shadowed alley into a clue. She tracked down Mrs. Abernathy, who now insisted she'd never heard of such a place. Her eyes held a terror that felt practiced, unnatural, as if she were reciting lines from a script she didn't want to remember. The air in the room grew thick with the scent of old dust and something metallic, a warning that hung heavy in the silence. Sarah felt it first in the alley behind 5th and Mercer, a sudden, icy drop in temperature, a smell like ozone and old paper. She turned, and for a fraction of a second she saw it, a heavy oak door with a tarnished brass handle, set into a soot-stained brick wall. Her eyes snapped shut and open, revealing only unbroken wall where the door had been. Sarah. Leo. A damp, mineral scent filled her nostrils as she stumbled forward. Her palms met solid, unyielding stone where the doorway had vanished moments before. It happened again and again, always at the corner of her eye, a flicker of movement that vanished the moment she tried to look directly. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and old dust, a tangible pressure that made her breath hitch. It was a maddening, silent pursuit that frayed the edges of her sanity. Then, She encountered Henry in a dusty, forgotten bookstore. His gaze held a weight that seemed to press the air from the room. A faint scent of old paper and mildew clung to the heavy silence. His voice was a dry rasp, cutting through the quiet. "You're looking with too much hope," he said. "Excessive belief reeks of desperation. It conceals something." A thick, coppery scent of old blood hangs in the damp air. From the shadows, a faint scratching sound whispers against the walls. Sarah's voice cut through the stillness. What hides? The forgotten library is a parasite on perception. It exists in the gap between what you know and what you've dismissed. To find it, you must stop seeking it. Not just pause, but truly, utterly, cease the search itself. Henry gave her a method, a cognitive paradox he called the Leth technique. She had to walk those alleys not to find the door, but to actively convince herself the library was pure fiction. The damp, metallic scent of wet brick filled her nostrils as she whispered the lie to herself. With each step, she tried to unbelieve, the very air growing thick with the effort of her denial. Leo's disappearance had a mundane, tragic explanation. Sarah had to grieve a brother she believed was dead, not lost. She wandered those damp, narrow passages where the air carried the scent of ozone and decay. Her fingers traced the cold, rough brickwork, as if searching for some forgotten trace. In those solitary moments, a profound dread took hold. The realization that some truths offer no comfort, only deeper shadows. Sarah's voice was a hollow monotone, devoid of any emotion. "The library isn't real," she insisted, the words hanging in the stale air. Leo had a complete breakdown, a fracture in his mind that couldn't be mended. He simply ran away into the night, and now, he's just gone. Mrs. Abernathy lived a life of profound isolation, her days measured in dust and echoes. Henry was a man of perpetual sourness, a neighbor defined by his endless, muttered grievances. Between their two homes, a wall stood bare and seamless, an architectural impossibility. It was a solid expanse of plaster that hummed with a faint, metallic scent when the rain came. She repeated it like a mantra, burying her hope beneath a mountain of manufactured doubt. The emotional agony was a physical weight, each repetition feeling like a betrayal of life. Then, the very atmosphere in the room shifted. A sharp, metallic scent of ozone filled the air, and a profound, unnatural stillness descended. The alley's ambient noise faded to a muffled hush, the air thickening like congealing oil. Sarah slumped against the cold, damp bricks, her soul hollowed by the certainty her brother was lost forever. A solitary tear carved a cold trail down her cheek, the only movement in the stagnant gloom. Then, the faint scent of ozone and wet stones pickled the air, a silent herald in the oppressive quiet. Her gaze lifted, not with hope, but with hollow resignation. Narrator. And there it was, not flickering at the edge of sight, it simply existed, solid and undeniable in the gloom. The solid oak door stood slightly ajar, its reality undeniable. A faint, golden light bled from within, spilling onto the wet pavement below. The damp air carried the scent of wet earth and old wood. It was an invitation, quiet and absolute. It had been there all along. Sarah had simply stopped perceiving. Now the door swung open, revealing an impossible geometry within. The air carried the scent of ozone and old paper, while a distant, wet scratching echoed from the shelves that leaned at unnatural angles. A primal dread took hold as she stood at the threshold, paralyzed by the sheer scale of the wrongness before her. The books hummed with a low, psychic vibration. The air was frigid, carrying the scent of ancient dust and dry, forgotten ink. This was the forgotten library. Here, volumes with blank covers shifted subtly beneath your gaze, their titles refusing to stay still. The books held stories that would dissolve into nothing if ever spoken aloud. One volume pulsed with that gentle, mournful luminescence, its title forming directly in Sarah's mind. The True Dream of Arthur Pendragon, Never Remembered. Another book he cited seemed bound not in leather, but in a shifting, ethereal fog, its cover whispering the title, All the Conversations Left Unfinished. Her breath caught in her throat as the air grew thick with the scent of old paper and something metallic, and she barely managed to whisper, "Leo." And then she saw him, at a reading desk in a distant nook, illuminated by a single green-shaded lamp. Leo was furiously writing a large, leather-bound book, but he was translucent. The air in the library grew thick and stale, the only sound the frantic scratch of his phantom pen. The fluorescent lights flickered violently, casting strobing shadows across the unstable aisles as Sarah sprinted toward the exit. Leo slowly raised his gaze, his face drained of all color, appearing almost translucent under the harsh, intermittent light. A metallic scent, like ozone and old copper, hung thick in the chilled air, making every breath taste of static and decay. The only sound was the frantic rhythm of Sarah's retreat and the low, electric hum of the failing lights, a dissonant prelude to the stillness that followed. The book before him bore faint silver letters, The Life and Unwriting of Leo Carter. Then, Leo's voice echoed from somewhere distant, almost spectral. "You shouldn't have come. You believed it was gone." Sarah's response cut through the heavy air, a defiant tremor in her voice. "I came to get you." Leo discovered his unwritten book, the story of his life, but a better version. the tale of the poet who truly mattered. The air grew heavy with the scent of aged paper and something metallic, like ozone after a storm. A primal dread took hold as he began to read, the words whispering from the page like a forgotten memory. His breath hitched, the silence around him thickening, as if the very room held its breath. When you read a book here, you become part of its archive. Sarah reached for him, but her hand passed through his shoulder. He was becoming text, a story filed away. The library around them groaned, shelves rearranging themselves with a sound of grinding stone. The entity perceived a fresh, believing consciousness, a contaminant in its domain. Leo's voice grew distant, frayed with desperation. "You must leave," he urged, the words tasting of ozone and decay. "It will craft a book for you too." A tome titled Sarah Who Forgot. As Leo watched, a new volume manifested beside him on the desk, its cover solidifying into a photograph of Sarah's smiling face that began to dissolve before his eyes. The scent of old paper and something faintly metallic, like ozone after a storm, filled the air. In Sarah's mind, a cold, logical terror ignited, a primal understanding that her very existence was being erased from the record. Her breath hitched, the air in the room growing thick and heavy with the palpable dread of the unseen process. Sarah's fingers found the heavy volume instead of Leo, the book that held his unwritten life. The leather cover felt unnaturally cold and damp, as if pulled from a forgotten crypt. A scent of aged paper and something metallic like old blood filled the space between her and where Leo had stood. In that frozen moment, the weight in her hands promised answers far more terrifying than the empty air where her friend had vanished. The air turned glacial as her fingers made contact. Instantly, the library erupted, a cacophony of tearing vellum and shattering glass. The lights convulsed, plunging the room into strobing chaos. From the maelstrom, a voice solidified into a gasp. "Sarah!" Sarah didn't read the book. Instead, she reached into her pocket, pulling out the small lighter she kept for checking damp book spines in the archives. A practical solution, perhaps, but one the library never anticipated. The air grew heavy with the scent of old paper and impending ozone. Her breath hitched as the flame caught, not on paper, but on something that shouldn't have been there. Her fingers flicked, and the flame met the corner of Leo's unwritten book. "No story gets to have him." Sarah's voice was a raw, guttural command. The book didn't burn. It erupted in a silent detonation of searing light and fractured memories. A child's laugh, a line of terrible verse, the scent of a mother's cooking. All burst forth, and the very library seemed to flinch away from the impossible spectacle. The shelves dissolved into a streaking smear as the door materialized behind them, a perfect rectangle of absolute darkness. Hands locked together, Sarah and Leo staggered through the threshold into the alley's oppressive damp. The air reeked of wet stone and something faintly metallic, like old pennies. Their balance failed, and they crashed onto the slick ground, the impact jolting through their bones. Behind them, with a sound like a sigh, the door is simply gone. Just a brick wall, close on. Sarah and Leo, sitting in the rain, breathing heavily. Leo is solid, real, shivering. The air grows heavy with the scent of wet earth and the metallic tang of ozone, sealing them in. Leo stares at his palms as though they belong to a stranger. His voice is a raw scrape in the damp air. "A better story." Sarah's reply is a whispered sob, her tears indistinguishable from a downpour. "Your real one is enough for me." The final frame holds them as they turn, leaning into one another. A single, fragile shape against the endless, weeping dark. The camera holds on the empty wall. Then, for just a second, the faint outline of the door frame glimmers like a mirage. A forgotten page from Leo's book drifts down into the alley below. It lands in a murky puddle, the ink bleeding and blurring into nothingness. They never saw the door again. Leo's memories of the library dissolved like mold. Sarah sealed hers away, a secret she could barely trust. Yet in quiet moments, when doubt seeps in, and she stops believing in magic, or monsters, or lost libraries, a sudden, sharp coldness grips her, as if the air itself has turned to ice water. For an instant, she catches the scent of ozone and brittle paper. The music swells, then dies into a profound stillness. So tell me, what have you stopped searching for? What have you willed yourself to forget? Be careful, because something might be waiting in the blind spot of your mind for you to finally stop believing.
Curious? Subscribe and step through the next anomaly.